What would you do if the child you sacrificed everything for publicly denied you existed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. This story will make you think twice about family loyalty. The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across mahogany tables as servers glided between guests carrying silver champagne trays. Everything sparkled with meticulous perfection. White orchid centerpieces in geometric patterns, gold-rimmed Wedgwood china catching light like mirrors, silk ribbons draped across Chiavari chairs in elaborate bows. Margaret's planning showed in every detail, from ivory Belgian lace linens costing more than my monthly budget to hand. Calligraphed place cards positioned with mathematical precision. A 12-piece string ensemble played Mozart from the marble alcove. Instruments gleaming under lighting adjusted 17 times for the perfect golden glow. The ballroom was understated elegance, soaring frescoed ceilings, floor-to-ceiling windows draped in champagne silk, polished parquet floors reflecting chandeliers like mirror, smooth lakes. I sat at table 12, tucked behind a towering arrangement of white peonies, garden roses, and cascading jasmine that blocked my view of the head table. The arrangement cost more than I spent on groceries in 2 months. My nameplate read Mrs. Dorothy Walsh in elegant calligraphy, though everyone knew me as Kevin's aunt, the one who raised him after his parents died, the one who paid for this celebration. But tonight, I felt like an interloper in someone else's fairy tale. The empty chair beside me bore a card-reading guest, as if forgotten entirely. Around me, other tables buzzed with conversation. Margaret's family sharing stories about exotic vacations and children at prestigious universities. Voices carrying the confidence of people who had never worried about money. Margaret's father Robert had delivered a heartfelt toast earlier, speaking of family traditions, dating back 4 generations, and welcoming Kevin into their distinguished lineage. The applause had been thunderous, with guests wiping tears as they honored the sentiment. Margaret's mother Linda followed with memories of watching her daughter grow from a precocious child, organizing tea parties into a confident woman, organizing Fortune 500 campaigns. Her voice trembled describing Margaret's accomplishments. Summa cum laude from Harvard Business School, a prestigious consulting position. Natural grace drawing people like moths to flame. Another standing ovation. No one asked me to speak. No one mentioned I might have something to say about the young man I had raised from age 7. After his parents died in that terrible I-95 accident, the young man whose fevered brow I had cooled through countless nights, whose multiplication tables I had helped him memorize, whose college tuition I had scraped together, despite double shifts at the textile mill. I had written a speech, actually practiced it in my bathroom mirror, timed to 3 minutes. The notebook was still in my purse, words chosen with care destined to remain unspoken. The soft chiming of silver against crystal brought attention to the head table. Kevin rose with practiced ease, microphone in hand, arm around Margaret's silk-covered waist. His perfectly tailored tuxedo, another expense I would quietly covered when he confessed he couldn't afford formal wear Margaret's family expected. The wedding cost $60,000, $45,000 from Linda's family, $15,000 from my carefully hoarded savings. I need to thank someone who has been absolutely instrumental in my life, Kevin began, voice carrying through the sound system. Someone who has been like a true parent to me. My heart fluttered with unexpected hope. After 18 months of coldness, systematic exclusion from planning, maybe this was when he would acknowledge what we had been to each other. Linda, he continued, turning toward Margaret's mother with a warm smile, thank you for raising such an incredible daughter. Thank you for welcoming me like your own son from day one. You have shown me what real mother's love means. The unconditional support I never knew I was missing. Applause erupted immediately. Chairs scraped as guests beamed at Linda, who pressed her hand to her chest with practiced grace, eyes glistening with genuine tears. She dabbed beneath carefully applied mascara with a lace handkerchief. People murmured how beautiful and so touching. I remained still, weathered hands folded like in church, smile frozen with muscle memory from 68 years of hiding disappointment. The coordinator refilling water glanced at me with possible pity, but I focused on the flickering votive candle, watching flame dance as if holding answers to unasked questions. Kevin continued, thanking Margaret for choosing him, her father for treating him like a son, friends for celebrating. He spoke about feeling grateful to join such a loving, generous family, looking forward to building traditions within their framework of success. When Kevin and Margaret took their first dance to At Last, I stayed seated while everyone crowded around with smartphones raised. I watched my nephew, the boy I had tucked in every night for 11 years, spin his bride under sparkling lights, face radiant with joy. I understood with physical clarity that I would become invisible, not gradually through neglect, but deliberately erased, like a pencil drawing rubbed away, and I had been too afraid to admit it. This wasn't momentary slight or social misstep. This was who Kevin had become through years of my accepting less than I deserved, making excuses for unacceptable behavior. I slipped out during cake cutting, through the garden entrance past manicured topiary, and drove home in my powder blue dress with radio playing softly, and mind strangely clear. The autumn of 1984 changed everything, with brutal finality splitting life into before and after. I was 37. Working quality control at Millfield Textiles. Living in the Cape Cod house my father left me. Life was quiet but comfortable. Morning coffee with newspaper. 8 hours examining fabric samples, evening television, and library mystery novels. I had never married, though came close with Tommy Henderson from shipping. We dated 2 years, looked at rings, but Tommy wanted children. 3 miscarriages taught me my body wasn't designed for pregnancy. Tommy deserved someone who could give him family. He married Janet Phillips 6 months later. Had 3 children. Seemed genuinely happy at grocery store encounters. I had made peace with solitude by 35. My house organized exactly as I liked. Schedule entirely mine. Saturday farmers markets, Sunday countryside drives, Wednesday library visits, work friends for conversation, church acquaintances for holidays, but deepest relationships with fictional characters and my backyard garden. Then came the phone call splitting my world like lightning. Rainy Thursday evening. Late October. Hospital called. Emergency room nurse asked if I was Dorothy Walsh, sister to Michael Walsh. Her tone shifted to that careful neutral register medical professionals use for devastating news. There has been an accident. Your brother and wife were in a collision on Route 95. I am very sorry. Neither survived. World tilted sideways. Phone receiver impossibly heavy, heartbeat in my ears, drowning the nurse's explanation of paperwork, decisions, arrangements. All I could think about was Kevin, 7 years old, sleeping at his friend's house, unaware his world had been destroyed. I drove to the hospital in my old Buick, hands shaking, rain pounding windshield like tears. Kevin sat in a plastic waiting room chair, dark hair messy spider, man pajamas wrinkled, clutching a stuffed elephant Susan had sewn for his 3rd birthday, thumb in mouth, despite being too old for comfort habits. When he saw me, he ran into my arms and sobbed until my shirt was soaked. Where is Mommy? Where is Daddy? The policeman said they went to heaven, but I don't understand. I held him while he cried, this small boy smelling like strawberry shampoo, and felt something fundamental shift inside my chest. Social worker explained with bureaucratic efficiency. Instant death. No suffering. No goodbye. Drunk driver walked away unscratched. Kevin had no other family. Maternal grandparents dead. Michael's parents gone since we were teenagers. Would I take temporary guardianship? I said yes before she finished explaining. That night, I brought Kevin home and made up the spare bedroom with cartoon character sheets from Woolworths. Kevin climbed into unfamiliar bed, still clutching his elephant, staring at ceiling with eyes decades older than 7. Am I going to live here now? Would that be okay? He nodded once, turned his face into pillow. I sat until he fell asleep, listening to hitching breath even out, promising myself I would figure out how to be enough. Early years were harder than anything I had experienced. Kevin barely spoke 3 months, moving through routines like a sleepwalker, nightmares 2 or 3 times weekly, calling for parents in heart-breaking voices. I had hold him until trembling stopped, then lie awake wondering if I was failing him. Money constantly tight. Modest textile mill salary covered basics, but Kevin outgrew clothes faster than I could replace them. Learned thrift stores, garage sales, mending toys instead of buying new, stretching grocery budgets with careful planning and coupons. For his 8th birthday, spent 3 weeks sewing a Superman costume because I couldn't afford the store version. Opening the gift at our small kitchen table, his face lit with the first genuine smile since the accident. "You made this for me. Who else would I make it for?" He hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. And for the first time, I felt maybe I was getting something right. Kevin never called me Mom, despite legal adoption at 10. Called me Aunt Dorothy even after paperwork was finalized. I told myself it didn't matter. He was grieving, needed to preserve connection to Michael and Susan's memory. But sometimes hearing other children with their mothers, I wondered what it would feel like to hear that word. When Kevin turned 18, graduated valedictorian thanks to hours spent at our kitchen table with algebra and essays. I sat him down for what I thought would be an important conversation. "Now that you are legally adult, I thought we should talk about what comes next. You are going to college, making your own decisions." He nodded, stirring sugar absently. "I want you to know that even though I adopted you, you decide what kind of relationship we have going forward. I don't expect you to think of me as your mother, if that doesn't feel right." Kevin looked up, mildly puzzled. "I figured that out years ago. You are not really my mom, you know. You are my aunt who took care of me after my parents died. I appreciate everything. But it is not like you are actually my mother." Words hit like cold water. Not the content exactly. I had known intellectually Kevin saw our relationship this way, but hearing it stated so matter-of-factly, with casual dismissal of 11 years of daily devotion, left me speechless. "Thanks for doing that, I guess," he said, standing to leave. "It was nice of you to make it official. Nice of me. As if legally committing to raise him had been a casual favor instead of the most significant decision of my life." I never stopped thinking of myself as Kevin's mother, even as he grew distant during college. Even when Margaret appeared like a force of nature, perfectly groomed and sharply intelligent, with firm opinions about everything. She was everything I wasn't educated at prestigious institutions, comfortable in intimidating social situations, fluent in success and ambition. First time Kevin brought Margaret for dinner, I spent an entire day preparing his favorite pot roast with carrots and potatoes. Susan's Sunday recipe, bought new napkins, polished grandmother's silver candlesticks, wanting to impress this woman who meant so much to him. Margaret arrived in perfectly tailored black dress and heels, costing more than my monthly car payment. She examined my modest dining room with polite interest people, touring historical houses. Appreciative but distant. Everything quaint but irrelevant. During dinner, she picked delicately at food, mentioned following a Mediterranean diet recommended by her nutritionist. Spent evening describing marketing firm job, dropping client names I had never heard. Describing luxury product campaigns I couldn't imagine purchasing. Kevin hung on every word, asking thoughtful questions, laughing at her stories. Leaving, Margaret offered brief professional handshake, feeling more like business transaction than family introduction. "Thank you for the meal, Dorothy." Very traditional. I told myself she needed time to warm up, probably nervous meeting Kevin's family. But Margaret never warmed up. The longer they dated, less frequently Kevin visited. Weekly calls became monthly check-ins, then occasional updates when he needed documents. I heard about Margaret's mother, Linda, secondhand, through Kevin's casual mentions of family dinners I wasn't invited to. Linda hosted elaborate parties with themed decorations and curated guest lists. Linda helped them shop for downtown loft furniture, offering to pay for pieces matching her style vision. Linda invited Kevin for Martha's Vineyard vacations, and Vermont skiing, treating him like the son she had never had. Never mentioned in these stories, never invited to participate. When Kevin talked about family dinners or traditions, he meant Margaret's family, not mine. I would become a footnote, someone from his past rather than his present. When Kevin and Margaret got engaged, I learned from Facebook at 7:30 Tuesday morning while eating breakfast. Margaret had tagged dozens, including me, but engagement happened 3 days earlier during Napa Valley getaway I knew nothing about. I typed congratulations with heart emojis, trying to sound enthusiastic despite feeling like responding to acquaintances' news. Margaret replied to several other comments, thanking people and mentioning party plans. Never replied to mine. 2 weeks later, neighbor Mrs. Chen congratulated me enthusiastically and asked about the engagement party she had seen Facebook photos of. I smiled and made non-committal responses, pretending I had been there. Later, I studied the photos. Kevin looked happy and relaxed, surrounded by Margaret's extended family in Linda's beautiful living room. Pictures of him laughing with Margaret's father over cocktails. Linda hugging him while Margaret showed off her ring. The whole group toasting with raised champagne glasses. Everyone looked complete, content, like the celebration included exactly the right people in perfect proportions. It was subtle, Linda's family absorbing Kevin. Missed invitation here. Casual assumption there. Margaret mentioning family dinners Kevin attended without considering I might like inclusion. Wedding planning always referenced Linda as mom, while I remained Kevin's aunt, as if our relationship was distant rather than 20 years of daily devotion. Kevin seemed not just comfortable, but actively pleased. He had found a family offering things I had never provided. Social status, financial security, influential connections, belonging to something larger and more prestigious. Linda's family gave him permission to reinvent himself as sophisticated and successful. Origins needn't include second-hand clothes and budgeted birthdays. But when he needed wedding money, Linda's contribution couldn't cover. He knew exactly where to turn. Tuesday evening, early March, Kevin appeared unannounced, first visit in 4 months. I was organizing tax documents, spreadsheets, and receipts across my kitchen table like puzzle pieces. I opened the door with genuine pleasure. So long since I had seen him, I momentarily forgot months of distance and exclusion. He looked good, confident in expensive winter coat and designer jeans, hairstyled suggesting salon visits rather than childhood barbershop. He didn't hug me, just stepped into living room, sat on my 15-year-old clearance sofa, eyes scanning familiar space with what looked like embarrassment. House hadn't changed, same faded rose wallpaper I couldn't afford replacing, worn carpet showing traffic patterns, collection of paperback novels and ceramic figurines. Margaret and I have been looking at reception venues. He began businesslike, as if delivering colleague presentations rather than talking to the woman who raised him. We found this incredible place, Riverside Country Club, where Margaret's cousin married last year. Everyone still talks about how beautiful it was. Really elegant, gorgeous harbor views. Perfect outdoor photography grounds. I nodded encouragingly, settling into my armchair, genuinely curious about wedding plans I had been almost entirely excluded from. The thing is, it is significantly more expensive than we initially budgeted. Linda's already contributed substantially, more than expected, but we are still short of what we need to book the venue we want. He paused, looking toward the small garden where I would taught him to plant tomatoes and sunflowers at 8. I could see him gathering courage. We need about $15,000 to make it work. I know it is a lot, but this is really important. Margaret's family has certain expectations, and I don't want to look like I cannot contribute my fair share. $15,000, more money than I spent in 6 months. My entire emergency fund plus most of my modest retirement savings. That is quite substantial, Kevin. It is my wedding, he replied defensively, reminding me of teenage years, wanting things I couldn't afford. This is important, Aunt Dorothy. It is not like asking for car money or vacation funds. This is about starting my marriage right, showing Margaret's family I can provide for their daughter. I studied his face, looking for traces of the boy who helped me bake Sunday cookies, cried in my arms when his goldfish died, thanked me tearfully when I scraped together 8th grade Washington, D.C. trip money. But the man on my sofa was a stranger wearing Kevin's features, someone who could ask for $15,000 as if reasonable rather than life-altering for my modest income. That money represents my entire emergency fund. What I have saved for medical emergencies, major home repairs, funeral expenses. It has taken years to save that much. Kevin leaned forward, expression shifting to practiced charm he had learned deploying when wanting something. If you really love me, you will not make this about money. This is about family, supporting me during one of life's most important moments. You always said you wanted me happy and successful. The manipulation was so blatant, it took my breath away. If I really loved him, as if 20 years of sacrifice and devotion counted for nothing unless I would bankrupt myself for his social aspirations. Give me a few days to think about it, I said finally. Not because I was considering his request, but because I needed time to process this conversation happening at all. His face brightened immediately. Thank you so much, Aunt Dorothy. I knew you would understand. Margaret will be so relieved. We were really stressed about this. Standing to leave, already reaching for his coat, as if conversation was concluded satisfactorily. Oh, and Margaret asked me to mention she would prefer if you wore navy or beige to the wedding. She is trying to maintain a cohesive color palette for photography. After he left, I sat surrounded by tax forms, trying to comprehend what had occurred. Kevin had asked for $15,000, with casual expectation I would provide it without question. He had manipulated me with guilt about loving him, dismissed my financial concerns, then instructed me about appropriate wedding attire, as if I was a potentially disruptive guest rather than the woman who had raised him. Next morning, I drove to First National Bank requesting a meeting with my financial advisor. I wanted to understand exactly what withdrawing $15,000 meant for my long-term security. The advisor, Patricia, who had helped manage my modest investments since my father's death, pulled up my accounts and frowned. Mrs. Walsh, withdrawing that amount would essentially eliminate your emergency fund and significantly reduce retirement security. You would be left with very little cushion for unexpected expenses. Are you sure this is necessary? I explained about Kevin's wedding, conflicted feelings about family obligations versus financial prudence. Patricia listened without judgment, occasionally asking about my relationship with Kevin and repayment expectations. Have you discussed this being a loan rather than gift? $15,000 could significantly impact your quality of life if something unexpected happens. I realized I hadn't considered asking Kevin to repay the money. The request was presented as emergency family assistance, not business transaction. I don't think he expects to pay it back. I think he sees it as something I should provide because I love him. Patricia nodded thoughtfully. I have been helping people manage finances for 20 years, seen many family situations like this. The question is whether providing this money will strengthen your relationship with your nephew, or simply enable him to continue taking your support for granted. That afternoon, I wrote a check for $15,000, not because I thought it financially wise or emotionally healthy, but because I wasn't ready to admit Kevin had become someone who would ask for my life savings without caring about impact on my security. I sealed the check in an envelope, left it on my porch as instructed, with a note explaining this represented my entire emergency fund, and asking him to acknowledge receipt. Kevin never collected it personally. Margaret picked it up while I was at work, leaving no note or acknowledgement. No thank you call, no text confirming receipt, no discussion of what this sacrifice meant. 3 days later, Kevin called saying they would successfully booked Riverside Country Club, and Margaret was so relieved. He thanked me briefly before launching into menu tastings and band selections, as if $15,000 had been minor administrative detail rather than massive financial sacrifice. Wedding planning continued revolving around me like elaborate dance I wasn't invited to join. Margaret sent exactly one email during 8 months between my contribution and wedding. Brief message asking if I could wear something neutral and understated to avoid clashing with carefully planned color scheme. I replied, I would dress appropriately. Asked if there was anything else I could help with. Margaret never responded. Despite everything, exclusion, manipulation, casual dismissal of my sacrifice, I arrived at Riverside Country Club early. I had chosen powder blue dress from Macy's senior section. Not quite Margaret's requested navy, but close enough. First new dress in 3 years, saleswoman said it was flattering. I had splurged on professional haircut and styling. For once, I felt presentable, maybe even pretty in age. Appropriate way that wouldn't embarrass Kevin or detract from Margaret's spotlight. But approaching the entrance, wedding coordinator barely glanced at her list before pointing me toward table 12 in the back corner. Positioned behind massive floral arrangement blocking most of my view. Table set for 8 but other 7 chairs remained empty throughout evening. Place cards reading simply guest. During cocktail hour, I watched Margaret's family pose for photographs in the manicured garden. Linda stood prominently next to Kevin and Margaret, hand resting possessively on Kevin's arm. When I approached hoping for inclusion in at least one photo, photographer waved me aside. Just immediate family for this series. We will do extended family later. Later never came. The ceremony was undeniably beautiful. White roses and golden sunlight streaming through tall windows. Kevin looked handsome and confident, speaking vows with conviction. Margaret was radiant in designer gown, cathedral veil, cascading like magazine cover. I watched from distant 4th row as they exchanged rings, promised to love and honor each other. When pronounced husband and wife, I clapped politely, as if my heart wasn't breaking watching my son. Because regardless of what he called me, that is what he was. Start a new life, with no place for me. The reception dinner featured multiple courses on fine china, with selected wines. I sat alone making polite conversation with servers, occasionally refilling my water. Around me, other tables buzzed. Margaret's college friends sharing European vacation stories. Linda's neighbors discussing children's prestigious university accomplishments. Kevin's colleagues talking stock options and bonuses. Then came the moment changing everything forever. Kevin rose during dessert course, microphone in hand, ready for traditional groom's toast. I felt hope flutter, thinking perhaps this was when he would acknowledge family that raised him. I want to thank someone absolutely instrumental in getting me to this moment. Someone who has been like a true parent, showing me what unconditional love and support really look like. My heart began racing. Maybe this was when Kevin would publicly acknowledge what we would meant to each other. Linda, thank you for raising such an incredible daughter. Thank you for welcoming me into your family, like I was your own son from day one. You have shown me what real mother's love means, the unconditional support every child deserves. Applause was thunderous, sustained, punctuated by here, and chairs scraping as guests rose for standing ovation. Linda pressed hand to chest, tears streaming as she mouthed, "I love you too," across the room. Margaret squeezed Kevin's hand, beaming at her mother. I remained seated, hands folded, smile frozen with lifetime muscle memory of hiding disappointment. Around me, guests turned looking first at Linda. Then me, confusion flickering across faces, trying to understand family dynamics. I kept gaze fixed on flickering candle, while Kevin continued thanking Margaret's father for treating him like a son, friends for celebrating, expressing gratitude for being welcomed into such loving, generous family. Family was used 7 times in his 3-minute speech. He never once looked my direction. When applause died and evening entertainment began, I sat understanding with perfect clarity I had just been publicly erased from Kevin's life story, not gradually through natural relationship evolution, but deliberately and completely, replaced by people offering something I had never provided: status, sophistication, social connections opening doors I had never known existed. The $15,000 had purchased my own invisibility. I would paid for the privilege of watching Kevin start a new life with no room for the woman who had raised him. I left during dancing, slipping out through garden entrance, past manicured topiary, driving home in powder blue dress with heart, feeling strangely, surprisingly calm. Next morning, I woke early and made a decision changing everything. Instead of wallowing in disappointment, I called Patricia, scheduling an appointment to discuss my financial future. I want to understand all my options. Investment accounts, retirement planning, estate planning, everything. That afternoon, I called a real estate agent for house market value estimate. The neighborhood had changed dramatically. Young professionals moving in, renovating older homes, transforming our quiet street into upscale area with maintained gardens and expensive cars. Real estate agent Sandra quoted a number making me sit down heavily, more than double what I had expected. Enough to pay off modest mortgage completely and leave substantial amount for investment or relocation. After Sandra left, I walked through my house with new eyes, seeing it not as repository of Kevin's childhood memories, but as valuable asset funding, my next life chapter. Kevin hadn't visited in 6 months. When he talked about home now, he meant the loft with Margaret or Linda's elegant house. My house had become just a place his aunt lived. Monday, I met with Patricia for the most comprehensive financial discussion I had ever had. She analyzed my complete picture: tax returns, investment statements, insurance policies, father's old will. Mrs. Walsh, you are in much stronger position than you realize. Between retirement accounts, house value and investments, your father set up growing for decades, you have significantly more resources than most people your age. She showed spreadsheets demonstrating how selling and downsizing could provide security for life's remainder, with enough left for travel, hobbies, or charitable giving. For the first time since Kevin's wedding, I felt possibility rather than disappointment. I think I would like to make some changes. Significant changes. First change was my will. I met with estate attorney David Morrison, brought documents and specific modification list. I want to remove Kevin completely from my estate. He inherits nothing. David looked surprised. I explained about the wedding, public dismissal erasing 20 years of sacrifice, years of marginalization, while providing financial support. David listened without judgment. What would you like to do with your estate instead? I had thought carefully. I want to establish a scholarship fund for non-traditional students returning to college. Specifically, people who delayed education caring for family members, single parents, guardian relatives. People like me who sacrificed opportunities to raise someone else's children. David's expression warmed. That is a wonderful legacy. Very meaningful. He prepared paperwork, creating the Dorothy Walsh Scholarship for guardian caregivers. Young people who had given up dreams to raise orphaned siblings, grandchildren, or other relatives would receive support I had never had. When finalized, I felt something I hadn't experienced in decades: complete control over my own future. For 20 years, every decision filtered through Kevin's needs. Now I was making choices based entirely on what I wanted. 2 weeks later, I called Sandra, putting my house on market. She was delighted, beginning preparations for listing photos and open houses. I had been researching coastal towns, looking for somewhere I could afford a small house within walking distance of ocean. I wanted a place where nobody knew my history as Kevin's disappointed guardian, where I could introduce myself simply as Dorothy Walsh, retiree. I found exactly what I wanted in Marblehead, Massachusetts, charming coastal town 45 minutes north of Boston, narrow streets lined with colonial houses and harbor sparkling like jewelry in morning sunlight. Active community center offering art classes and book clubs, library with excellent mystery collections, restaurants where single women could eat without feeling conspicuous. Most importantly, it had a small cottage for sale, 3 blocks from harbor, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, tiny garden perfect for herbs and flowers, wide windows overlooking water, mortgage payment easily manageable on retirement income, especially after profit from selling current house. I bought the cottage without telling anyone. Moving process took 6 weeks. I hired professional movers, keeping only what fit comfortably in new space. Kevin's childhood artwork, sports trophies, graduation photos. I packed them in large box with note explaining he could pick them up if wanted. Box sat on kitchen counter 3 weeks before I moved. Kevin never came to collect it. 2 weeks before closing, Kevin and Margaret showed up unannounced. They found me surrounded by labeled boxes and mostly empty furniture. Kevin stopped in doorway, face pale. "What is all this? Are you moving?" "Yes, I am relocating to the coast." Margaret stepped carefully around boxes, designer heels clicking on hardwood. "Moving where? Why didn't you tell us about such a major change?" "I am retiring to Marblehead. I found a lovely cottage near the harbor." Kevin sat heavily on my sheet, covered sofa. "But this is your house. You have lived here since I was a kid. Where are we supposed to visit you?" The question might have been funny if not so painfully revealing. "Kevin, you haven't visited in over 8 months. I don't think my moving will significantly impact your social calendar." Margaret and Kevin exchanged glances, struggling to process this new version of me. Someone making major decisions without consulting them, seeming perfectly content with plans, excluding their input. "This seems very sudden and impulsive," Margaret said carefully. "Are you sure you are thinking clearly? Maybe you should discuss such significant decisions with someone first." I looked at her directly. "Margaret, I am 68 years old. I have been making my own decisions since before you were born. I don't need anyone's permission to live my life according to my preferences." The cottage in Marblehead exceeded every expectation. I arranged my bedroom facing harbor to watch sunrise paint water gold and pink every morning, planted basil and oregano in tiny garden, learned to make fresh pesto, joined book club at local library, discovered I genuinely enjoyed discussing literature with people who didn't know my history as disappointed mother figure. For first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for anyone. Wasn't organizing schedule around someone else's needs or saving money for someone else's future. My days belonged entirely to me. Morning harbor walks, afternoon reading in sunny living room, evening cooking experiments with fresh local seafood. I bought watercolor paints, began teaching myself to capture light, reflecting off water at different times. Early attempts were amateur and clumsy, but I didn't care about quality. The process was meditative, requiring complete focus, leaving no room for dwelling on disappointment. 3 months after moving, Kevin started calling regularly. Conversations were awkward. He seemed grasping for connection we had lost years earlier. "How is the cottage?" "It is perfect." "Are you making friends? A few? Nice people? Do you miss anything about home?" "Not particularly." Calls were polite but hollow, like friendly acquaintances rather than people who had once shared daily life. Kevin seemed wanting something. Reassurance, forgiveness, maybe confirmation I was still available as safety net. But I found myself unwilling to provide whatever comfort he was seeking. Margaret called once, ostensibly checking on my adjustment to retirement life. But real agenda became clear quickly. "Kevin's been worried about you. This whole move seems so unlike you, so dramatic. Are you sure you are not depressed?" I almost laughed, Margaret. "I wake up every morning looking at ocean. I spend days reading books I want to read, talking to people who enjoy my company. I haven't been this content in years." Long pause. "It just seems selfish, moving so far from family. What if Kevin needs you for something important? What family and what could Kevin possibly need from me that he cannot get from Linda or your father or other people he considers his real family?" She couldn't answer that. Calls gradually decreased, as Kevin realized I wasn't going to beg him to visit. Wasn't going to guilt him about distance. Wasn't going to reorganize my life around his convenience. He had his real family, Linda and Margaret's father, and sophisticated relatives fitting seamlessly into his new life. He didn't actually need me, except for occasional crisis management, which came. Inevitably, 8 months after I moved. Tuesday morning in November, phone rang at 7 a.m., interrupting peaceful breakfast routine. Kevin's voice was strained, panicked. "Aunt Dorothy, I need help. Margaret and I are in serious financial trouble. Problem with company health insurance, unexpected medical bills from Margaret's emergency appendectomy. We are looking at $25,000 we cannot cover, affecting Margaret's credit score, which could impact her career." I sat in sunny kitchen, looking at gray November harbor where seagulls wheeled around fishing boats, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, no automatic impulse to solve his problem. Just strange, distant pity for the young man still thinking my love could be measured in checkbook balances. "I am sorry you are struggling. That sounds very stressful. Can you help us? I know it is substantial, but you always said I could count on you when things got difficult. Linda's already contributed what she can, but it is not enough. Kevin, I don't have that kind of money available anymore." Not entirely true. My carefully managed investments had grown significantly since I had simplified expenses and moved to less costly area. But it wasn't his money. Never had been. "What do you mean?" "You sold your house. You are retired with pension income. You must have resources for family emergencies. I have enough for my own needs, but I am not in position to support other people financially. My resources are allocated for my own security and peace of mind." Silence stretched, filled with his ragged breathing, as he tried figuring out how to respond to this new reality where I wasn't automatically available as his financial safety net. "But I am your nephew." "Yes, you are my nephew, and I love you. But love doesn't mean I am obligated to fund your lifestyle or solve your financial problems. You are a grown man with wife and career. These are your responsibilities." When I hung up, my hands weren't shaking. Heart rate hadn't increased. Peaceful morning routine hadn't been disrupted by anxiety or guilt. I felt, for first time in my relationship with Kevin, completely at peace with a decision prioritizing my own well-being over his expectations. He didn't call back for 6 months. When contact resumed, it came as wedding invitation in mailbox on rainy spring afternoon. Margaret's younger sister was marrying, and apparently I had made guest list. Envelope addressed to Mrs. Dorothy Walsh and guest, as if I might bring a date where I knew virtually no one. I read elegant invitation twice, admiring expensive cardstock and embossed lettering probably costing more than my monthly grocery budget. Then checked regrets box and mailed it back without explanation. 2 days after RSVP deadline, Linda called for first time since Kevin's wedding. "Dorothy, I was surprised not to see you on attendance list for Jennifer's wedding. I hope you are not experiencing health problems preventing you from celebrating with family." Voice carried particular tone of someone fishing for information while pretending genuine concern. "I am in excellent health, thank you. I simply choose not to attend events where I am clearly included out of social obligation, rather than genuine desire for my company." Linda was quiet, probably processing unexpected directness. "I think you may be misunderstanding our intentions. You are always welcome at family gatherings. We consider you part of extended family circle." "Linda, in 18 months since Kevin and Margaret's wedding, how many times have you called me? How many times have you asked about my life, health, happiness, or interests?" Another pause. "Well, you moved so far away. Marblehead is 90 minutes from Boston by car. Margaret and Kevin have driven farther for weekend skiing trips and romantic getaways." I could hear her sigh, suggesting frustration with my refusal to accept superficial relationship being offered. "What exactly do you want from us? We cannot force Kevin to be closer than he is comfortable being." "I don't want anything. I am not asking for anything. I am simply living my life according to my own preferences instead of organizing it around other people's comfort levels." Conversation ended politely but coolly. Linda never called again, and I felt no regret about relationship that had never actually existed outside social obligations. That summer, I embraced new life with enthusiasm, I hadn't felt in decades. Took pottery class at community center, something I had always wanted to try, but never had time or money for when raising Kevin. Initially terrible. Bowls collapsed, vases leaned drunkenly. Glazing attempts looked like finger painting accidents, but instructor Sarah, patient woman who had retired from teaching high school art, encouraged me to keep experimenting. Clay doesn't judge your technique, it just responds to energy you bring to it. If you are tense or worried about outcome, clay knows. If you are relaxed and focused on process, that shows too. Gradually, pieces improved, nothing museum, worthy, but functional and occasionally attractive in their imperfection. Made coffee mugs for my kitchen, glazed deep blue like harbor at twilight. Created small planters for herb garden, bowls looking intentionally rustic rather than accidentally amateur. Process became meditative. When working with clay, mind went completely quiet, stopped thinking about Kevin's rejection. Linda's conditional acceptance, years spent trying to earn love that should have been freely given, focused entirely on clay, responding to my hands, becoming something new and useful and mine. One evening late August, I sat on small deck with tea in one of my handmade mugs, watching sunset paint harbor pink and gold, fishing boats returning from their day, seagulls following hopefully toward docks. Air smelled like salt and sunscreen and lavender I had planted in containers around tiny garden. Phone rang. Kevin's name appearing for first time in months. I let it go to voicemail. Later, after finishing tea, I listened to his message. Voice sounded strained. Older, carrying weariness I hadn't heard before. Aunt Dorothy, it is Kevin. I have been thinking a lot lately about everything, about how I treated you. Things I said and didn't say. Margaret and I are going through couples counseling, and my therapist suggested I call you. I know I hurt you. I know I was selfish and ungrateful, and probably a lot of other things. I am not ready to admit yet. I would like to talk if you are willing. I saved the message, but didn't call back immediately. Instead, spent next few days thinking about what I actually wanted from conversation with Kevin. Not what I thought I should want, or what would be best for him, or what would restore our relationship to some imaginary previous state. What would genuinely serve my own peace of mind and emotional well-being? Answer surprised me. I didn't want apology exactly. Apologies could be performed, manipulated, used as currency to purchase forgiveness without requiring genuine change. I didn't want promises about future behavior because I had learned not to build happiness around other people's commitments. What I wanted was honesty, complete, uncomfortable, liberating honesty from both of us about what we would actually been to each other and what we realistically could be going forward. I called him back Thursday evening. After finishing dinner and settling into favorite chair with view of harbor lights twinkling in gathering dusk. Kevin, I got your message, Aunt Dorothy. Thank you for calling back. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. But I decided we might as well clear the air once and for all. I have been thinking about your wedding, about what I said in my speech, about calling Linda my real mother. I know it hurt you, it did hurt me, but not for reason you might think. It hurt because it was honest. Linda does feel more like real mother to you than I ever did. That is painful to hear, but it is better than continuing to pretend otherwise. Kevin was quiet for a long moment. That is not, I mean, you raised me. You took care of me when nobody else could or would. Yes, I did, and I am proud of that accomplishment. But Kevin, you were never actually my son. You were my brother's son, and I did my best to honor his memory by raising you well. I think I succeeded at that goal. You are a decent man with good career and wife who loves you. Mission accomplished. But you are my family. I am your family, but I am not your mother, and never was. I was your guardian, your caretaker, your supporter. Those are important roles, but they are not same as being parent. Linda is Margaret's mother, and you feel comfortable with her in way you never felt with me. That is not failure on anyone's part, it just is. So what does that mean for us? Are we okay? I looked out at harbor, where few boats were still making their way back to shore in gathering darkness, navigation lights creating small constellations on water. We are honest. For first time in years, we are being completely honest about what we actually are to each other, instead of what we think we should be. I love you, Aunt Dorothy. I love you too, Kevin. And because I love you, I am not going to pretend anymore that we have a relationship we don't actually have. You don't need to call me out of guilt or obligation. You don't need to visit because you think you should. You don't need to include me in events where I am unwelcome. And I don't need to organize my life around waiting for you to need me. Conversation ended peacefully, but definitively. We understood each other in a way we never had before. Kevin had his life, his real family, his place in the world that made sense to him, and I had mine. 3 months later, I received postcard in mailbox. Not for birthday or holiday, just random Tuesday in December. Photograph of Marblehead Harbor taken from lighthouse. Same view I saw from bedroom window every morning. Inside, Kevin had written in careful handwriting, "Saw this at bookstore in Boston, and thought of you. Hope you are happy." I was happy. Deeply, quietly, completely happy in a way I had never been when contentment depended on someone else's approval or recognition. I put postcard on refrigerator next to photograph of my latest pottery creation, serving bowl I had made for community center's annual fundraising auction. It had sold for more than expected, money helping fund art classes for seniors, like me discovering new talents in retirement. That evening, I called Sarah from pottery class and invited her for dinner at new seafood restaurant overlooking harbor. Not because I was lonely or desperate for company, but because I genuinely enjoyed her friendship and wanted to share good meal with someone whose company I valued. We talked about glazing techniques and upcoming art shows, about her grandchildren across country and my watercolor experiments. Discussed books we would read and travel destinations we hoped to visit. Never mentioned Kevin or Margaret or Linda or any of the people who had once dominated my thoughts and shaped my decisions. Walking home after dinner, I passed art gallery window, displaying watercolor paintings of local seascapes. I paused studying techniques artist had used capturing light on water, thinking about advanced painting class I had been considering. Not because Kevin might visit someday and be impressed by my artistic development, but because I was genuinely curious about whether I could learn to paint the way morning light transformed harbor outside my bedroom window. At 68, I was finally living for audience of one. Me. And it was enough. More than enough. It was everything I had been waiting for without realizing I was waiting. What do you think? Should Dorothy have given Kevin another chance to rebuild their relationship? Or was she right to prioritize her own happiness and peace of mind? Have you ever had to set firm boundaries with family members who took your love and support for granted? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to check out our other family drama stories that will challenge your assumptions about loyalty, respect, and what we really owe the people who claim to love us.